This is Glenn Pendlay with the Weightlifting Scoop, and I kind of have I think a fairly good topic today. It pertains to where we are going to get the good lifters in the future that are going to help us get better at weightlifting as a team and as a country. I've talked about this before on a previous podcast when Don McCauley and I think Dan Bell were here, and it's something I've talked to a number of other coaches about. And that is the fact that we seem to do all right. And I've personally, as a coach, done all right with lifters that start later in life. I think of several of the lifters that I've coached that are better than average, I would say, have started in their 20s. Donnie started when he was 20. Donnie Shankle. John Norris started, I believe, when he was 22. Or 21 or 22, after a prematurely shortened career in college football. James Tatum started well into his 20s after an athletic background that wasn't college athletics, but powerlifting and some judo and some just various different things like that. And I have here with me Mike Szela, who I think is probably the poster boy, if you will, for someone who is the ideal athlete, or had the ideal situation as a college athlete to come into weightlifting later in life and do well. If you're not familiar with how, Mike Szela's weightlifting career so far, he took third at the American Open. That was your first major meet, right, Mike?
I took third at Nationals last year also.
Okay, so third at Nationals, third at the American Open. Then in training, in the last couple of months, he's hit a 289 total at 69 kilo weight class, which if he had done that in competition would have put him on the Pan Am team and quite possibly the world team. To get an idea of, he's been pretty successful, and he hasn't been in the sport full time for all that long compared to, most of the people he's competing against. So I just want to discuss with Mike his history in strength training, and strength training for baseball and football, I believe. So you can get an idea of how it can work in an ideal situation. I think Mike's situation is pretty ideal when you talk about athletes coming into the sport late. Mike, when did you do any training other than just, I'm sure you did some just general strength training in high school. I mean, bench presses, squats, something like that. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So you were training for football, I assume.
Right.
Or baseball.
Football and baseball. I did just about the same type of weight training for either sport.
And it was not snatches and clean and jerks?
No. I maybe did some awful attempts at power cleans once every 2 or 3 weeks. That was about it.
But would it be fair to say that coming out of high school you were strong and in decent shape?
That's definitely fair to say.
Okay. So move on to college, because you didn't start weightlifting full-time as a sport until you were out of college.
Correct.
So you've mentioned to me before that you were pretty interested in strength training in college, probably even more than most people that are in football or baseball.
Yeah, definitely. I always seem to enjoy the off-season training as much or more than, the in-season practices.
What can you describe to me what your collegiate background was in strength training?
Well, for 2 years, my first 2 years of college, we maybe did cleans maybe twice a week, kind of like a 2-day.
Power cleans or regular cleans?
Most guys did power cleans. It wasn't really specified what you had to do, so it was pretty much all power cleans.
Any snatching?
Almost none.
Any jerking?
Almost none.
Okay. What about squatting?
Squatting twice a week.
Twice a week. Were they the sort of squats you do now, or was it something different?
Started out somewhat similar to what I do now. Not quite as low on the depth, but I did have I did set the bar pretty high on my back. When I was an upperclassman in college, I had a buddy who was big into powerlifting, and I started playing with my squat technique to try to get some more pounds on my squat max, and I ended up doing pretty close to more typical powerlifting squat with a belt, with setting the bar much lower on my back, getting my feet much wider, and I was, up my max by playing with my technique that way.
What did you enter college squatting?
175 kilos.
Okay. What did you leave college squatting?
At least 210.
Okay.
At least 210.
So, if nothing else, you got a shitload stronger, on your squat in college. And that's, obviously that's great because you entered weightlifting very strong. What about, you said your first 2 years you did more of a powerlifting style?
Yeah, kind of
training?
Squat and bench were the main lifts.
Okay.
So
what about the last 2 years?
The last 2 years, we got a new strength coach, and he was used weightlifting a lot more. We squatted 4 days a week and did either a snatch or a clean 4 days a week, and then a jerk probably once or twice a week.
So you snatch twice a week, clean twice a week, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. What did you see performance improvements as an athlete?
I did. I did see performance improvements. I felt like the cleans carried over to my sprint speed, especially my top speed. My vertical jump definitely went up.
Just to get an idea, on your college experience, were there a lot of guys there that say graduated with decent cleans and decent numbers for their body weight?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And one of the reasons I just bring this up is because had you walked into competitive weightlifting as someone who had never done a clean, never done a snatch, didn't have a decent squat, what do you think, in your opinion, I know what my opinion is, but in your opinion, would you have been able to get near the top of your weight class? Hopefully, after nationals, I can say the top, but near the top of your weight class as quick as you have?
I don't think I would have had as much success as quickly as I have had I not had the strength base to begin with.
And I think that's really important for the topic here, which is the ability of an athlete coming out of college with a good lifting background, in good shape, whatever, being able to do fairly well at weightlifting within their first, 2 or 3 years. I don't think it's very likely, even if you're a great football player, if you can't power clean well, at least, and hopefully snatch fairly well and jerk and the rest of it, it's going to be a fairly long road. But for Mike, it hasn't been a long road because he came out of a college strength program that taught those lifts. So you started fairly high, from a fairly high level compared to most people. That's allowed you to be successful fairly quickly. How would you rate yourself as, first of all, were you interested in doing weightlifting while you were in college? I mean, did you have that plan, or were you thinking about, when I graduate, I want to find a team somewhere or something and compete?
Yeah, actually, before I had graduated college, I had thought that doing some weightlifting competitions would be something that I'd be interested in. I was getting pretty good at the cleans at least, and the jerks were all right. My snatch wasn't so great when I was in college for sure. But like I said, my strength coach, he had done competitive weightlifting, and I told him, I think when I graduate, I might want to give this a try. And it was actually a while before I ended up doing my first competition, but I had at least had those thoughts before I graduated.
And I think that's also an important point. If you never snatch or clean or jerk or whatever, there's going to be very few kids that decide that, hey, when I graduate and get out of baseball or get out of football, I want to do this, But if you're exposed to it, it's much more likely, Was there anybody else that you trained with in college that had those thoughts once they had been kind of exposed to the movements and their strength training, that thought, yeah, I could be good at this and maybe I'll give it a shot?
I don't know of anybody from my team that's ever done any weightlifting competitions besides myself.
Well, at least we got one.
Yeah.
How would you rate yourself as a weightlifter when you got out of college?
I thought my clean was pretty dang good. And I thought I was strong enough to continue to make improvements and have some success. So,
was there anybody that you played with in college that you think was better than you?
At weightlifting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a guy who I remember seeing him power snatch 315 pounds and power clean 405 pounds.
And that was a D3 school.
Right.
Okay.
He was a linebacker.
And that just get how much did he weigh? Any idea?
He was maybe 230 at the most.
So 105. And those are numbers that are very similar to what some of the top lifters in the country can do at those movements. Power snatch 142, power clean 182, 184, something like that. I mean, those if you polled the top 5 Olympic lifters in the country to ask them what they power snatched and power clean, my guess is that's going to be better than some of them. I think not as good as a couple, but better than some. So that's tremendous. It's tremendous to know that at some little D3 school, there's guys that are close to the top in weightlifting in the United States, at least at the power versions of the movement, and probably would be very competitive with the top lifters in the country at the full snatch and the full clean if they just learn to do them and were interested in the sport. I think that gives everyone hopefully a little inkling of the kind of talent that is out at colleges and various places across the U.S. Playing other sports and just doing the Olympic lifts or variations of the Olympic lifts as a training tool for, say, football or baseball. It seems like I have never been to a college, talked to a collegiate, coach of football at least, where there hasn't been at least a couple of guys on the team that did that kind of thing and did those kind of numbers. They're everywhere, all across the U.S. And there's definitely, you are not the only one that if exposed to competitive weightlifting might really enjoy it and enjoy doing that well at something, after college. There's a lot of college athletes out there who don't want their athletic career to end necessarily when they go through graduation. They would like to compete at something, like to be at the top of something, like to do well in something, and like to still be an athlete. But that just have never been exposed to weightlifting. I think that's a huge point. And up to then, it seems like your training had been pretty ideal to point you in the direction of eventually becoming a top weightlifter. You definitely exercised, strength trained, were in great shape in high school, came out of high school, got exposed to the Olympic lifts in a pretty major way as a collegiate athlete. And then I don't think you would have ever actually come down here and became a full-time weightlifter had it not been for your friend, and I use that word lightly, Tom Stroka. Describe how that happened.
Well, actually, Tom knew my girlfriend in college before I ever met him because they were both through the field events in track, and so they spent a lot of time around each other at the weekend meets and whatnot. And then at the first nationals I went to in 2012, she came with me and introduced me to Tom, who had just moved out to California to train with you. And I had been, in sporadic contact with him after I met him. And then he was one of the guys who encouraged me to come out for the tryout once it was announced last summer.
Okay. So you came to the tryout, as I understand it from talking to you before, you didn't really expect to make the team.
Well, I hadn't planned on competing at that time. Once nationals was over, I thought that the next time I would step on the platform for a competition that was important to me would be the American Open. And that was still quite a ways off. And the announcement of the tryout last summer was kind of a surprise to me. And I was very apprehensive at first when I first read the post of coming out because I hadn't planned on, being on the competition platform at that time.
Mm-hmm. And Tom convinced you?
Tom, as well as my girlfriend, convinced me to come out and take the shot because they both told me I'd regret it if I didn't. So
what changed for you in weightlifting when you actually came out and took the shot, got invited, and moved down here? I mean, were there any huge changes in how you looked at the sport, your training for the sport? I mean, what was the effect of that on you?
I think a big thing that was one of the big effects on me was that I wasn't spending the majority of my time doing stuff besides weightlifting. The thing that I spent the most time on once I moved out here was weightlifting training and practice. Before that, I had been personal training at a commercial gym, so I was focused on my clients there, always thinking of their programs and their results. I was also the strength coach for a high school football team, so I was always thinking and spending energy on coming up with their program and thinking about their results and their season and how it was going to go. And then I would have to shift over to my own training, try to formulate my own training program, think of how I was going to increase my results. Once I moved down here, I was able to devote a lot more of my time and energy to my own progress, and I didn't have to spend any energy on anyone else.
Yeah. And obviously your first, 6 months here maybe, were kind of rocky.
Kind of rocky. I thought I did pretty well when I first got here, and then I definitely hit a rough patch after the first month where the PR. The PRs had pretty much dried up and didn't look like they were coming back anytime soon.
Well, I remember, the biggest thing when you were somewhat inconsistent on your jerks.
Yeah.
And when the biggest thing when you got here was, you were strong and you were able to clean pretty good weights, but you couldn't snatch worth a damn. I mean, I can remember some of the first, months of workouts when we were in the old gym where it was a crapshoot on a daily basis whether you're going to snatch 110.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was, one workout you'd make it. The next time we went up in weight, you would, be missing weights under that multiple times. And once you got to 110, 112, you were so tired that, it wasn't going to go, and it was just back and forth. And there was a long time it didn't really seem like there was a lot of progress. And then, you were going through some major changes in your snatch technique, which was pretty terrible. I hate to say it, but
I was there.
You were there. And then one day it kind of clicked for you, and you made a PR, and then another one, and then another one, and then you'd go like a month without, and then you'd make 2 or 3 more, it seemed like. And it just steadily built up to your current max is 131 in a snatch. I think the weight you made at the tryout was 112 or something.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised I remember that, but I do. But so there's been, pretty major progress there, and pretty major progress on your total. At the American Open, what was your total at the American Open?
257.
257, and your best, you totaled 270 at the Arnold. 275 at the Arnold. Sorry for cheating you there, Mike. And between the Arnold and now, you've raised your best training total to 289. We'll see how it goes in competition, but at least the weights you're lifting in training are up, definitely up. And that, that 20 kilo increase in your total went from, at 256, or what did you total at the 2012 Nationals?
257.
257. So that, you significantly increased that, and that's increased you from a lifter that was, basically no threat to make any international team. 20 or 30 kilos off of what you would need to be one of the, say, top 10, top 8, whatever lifters in the country. And now if you are able to do something near your 289 total, you'll definitely be within the top 10 and maybe higher than that. So that's major improvement, and that's the type of improvement that I would say normally takes literally years. You've been able to do that in a year, less than a year. And, that I think largely has to do with your experience in college. Obviously, if you would have if you would have been doing something different from age, say, 18 to 22, you're not going to be at lifting the weights, at least in practice, as you are today. It would be virtually impossible. And my thoughts on this, to kind of turn this away from looking at Mike specifically into looking at the talent we have in weightlifting as a whole country, is that there are, and I think you tell me if you agree with this, but there are literally thousands of folks like you around the whole country, thousands that have the talent level to walk into weightlifting, learn to do the lifts in an efficient manner, and very quickly in their career as an actual weightlifter, do the kind of things that you've done. Would you agree with that?
I definitely think that's true.
I mean, you're saying there were others in your specific D3 college. If you look at every Division I, Division II, Division III college in the country, you're going to find thousands of people with that kind of talent. And a lot of them will have the kind of experience that you had in college, where you're using the snatch and clean and jerk as training exercises for football or baseball or whatever, and would be if they were exposed to the sport, interested in the sport, and wanted to still be an athlete, compete in something after their graduation day, would probably end up loving weightlifting. You're
so.
Definitely not the only athlete that I've ever talked to that said while they were in college, they enjoyed the off-season training in the weight room as much or more than they enjoyed playing the actual games and the in-season type training. I don't think you're unique in that aspect. John North has told me the same thing. And he kind of went through the same thing you did, where they did, I don't think they snatched, but they did the clean. He was cleaning 350 plus in college as a football player, 350 pounds plus. So the transition to weightlifting, it didn't take too long before he was at least medaling or whatever in national meets. Same as you, and then he found Cal Strength, and that kind of started his career as like a full-time weightlifter. And, as I understand it from this conversation and others, you were kind of trying to do it on your own, but it's kind of tough to do it on your own with a job and with other responsibilities and no real full-time coach. It's kind of difficult to do it on your own. You were kind of in that situation before you came down here.
Yeah, definitely. Trying to do it without a coach or teammates is tough. You can hit rough patches and just have no one to turn to as for a reason why, or even just for the support to work through it and get back to where you're hitting good weights again.
Yeah, and that I think there are, again, thousands of people who graduate with the ability to do well in weightlifting. And to tell you the truth, if you look at the genetic ability of the average, like, genetic potential of folks in weightlifting that are, say, ranked in the top 5 in their weight class, there's literally thousands of people out there at age 22 that graduate from college with a history of strength training in college for a varsity sport that probably have better genetics and potential than the average of potential and whatever of our, top 5 in each weight class. There's tons and tons of folks with very good genetics, very high potential, that just need to be drawn into the sport. And I think that a lot of coaches have the thought process that if you don't get somebody at 10 years old and train them through their teenage years, that they just don't have the background, the potential, the experience, whatever, when they get into their 20s to do well on a national level, or even, especially to do well on an international level. We don't have too many people that do well on an international level. And so it's thought, some of the ones that do, have been training 15 years or whatever. My opinion is that I've had a couple of athletes that, I've started coaching, at 10 years old or 12 years old or whatever, that were basically full-time weightlifters, for a long period of time. And probably one of the best guys that I've coached is Caleb Ward, who fits that mold perfectly. He started at 12 years old. He never did any other sport. He broke the junior American record in the clean and jerk, at age 19 with a, 203 kilo or 446 pound clean and jerk. That's pretty prototypical with how most coaches would love to have the career of their athlete go. And I think that is awesome. And that's probably the ideal way to do it. Our problem in the United States is we can't find enough super talented 12-year-olds or 10-year-olds that don't want to go play football in high school and maybe play in college if they're able, in order to populate our ranks with enough good, talented individuals to force us to do better on the international stage. It's great if you get that situation. And, who knows what would have happened, if Mike would have taken up weightlifting when he was 10 and never played football and baseball. But was there any chance that would ever happen? If I talked to you at 10 years old and you knew that a great weightlifting team was training a mile from your house, would you have said, okay, I won't play high school football and I won't play high school baseball, and I'm just going to devote myself to weightlifting? I'm going to guess the answer to that question would have been hell no.
There's zero chance whatsoever.
Yeah, because anybody that's a great athlete, when they enter middle school or enter high school, they want to play football. If they're good at it and they can be the star, they want to play. And so our ability, the situations where a coach comes across someone like Caleb Ward with his amount of talent at that young of an age, and he has no desire to do any other sports and just wants to do weightlifting and try to make it to the Olympics, we're never going to have the thousands of those people that enter the sport that way to make us more competitive, in my opinion. Because you need multiple good people in a weight class for one of them to get really good. It's a competitive aspect. If you've got one guy at 69 that beats everyone else by 40 kilos, the likelihood that he will lift an extra 20 kilos to move to actually success on the international level, in my opinion, is fairly low. But if you got 5 guys or 10 guys that are totaling 280, the likelihood of one of them being pushed by competition to total 300 or 310, much, much more likely. And so that, in my opinion, is really what we need in this country. And the ability to find the most direct and easy route to achieve that is to find folks coming out of college sports. Because many of them, by the time they've been weeded out, people that did good in high school enough to get a scholarship somewhere, and then obviously progressed and were top tier when it comes to lifting and doing power cleans and whatever else you're going to do in college athletics. You've weeded out the top 1%, as far as ability is concerned, the genetic potential to do a big clean and jerk. And so if we go after those people, then we're going to have the ability to have many, many more people within a couple of percent of whoever wins nationals. And I think that's, something that can drive results, because it can drive the very top lifters higher, knowing they have to beat 5 other guys that are totaling 5 or 10 kilos less than them instead of one other guy who's totaling 20 kilos less. It puts pressure on them. It drives results up. And there are those who would argue that by the time a kid's 20 or 22 and he starts out, he has no chance. I would argue, based on some experience, that people that age can have a chance. A definite chance. I want to ask you your opinion on some things. Let's just take for granted that you or listeners or whatever agree with me that is a very important population to consider recruiting if you're trying to produce lifters at the minimum that can be competitive and win on the national level. What could somebody like me or USA Weightlifting as a whole have done to get a hold of you and recruit you and increase the chances that you would try out weightlifting the day after you graduated college and try out competing? I mean, I know you did. You took that road and it worked for you, but you certainly realized, just based on what else we've discussed here, that you were an exception. What could you think of the guys that were also power snatching, power cleaning, whatever, big numbers, either on your team or your experience with other teams, et cetera, et cetera? What could we do to make it more likely that a guy like you discovers weightlifting, finds a place that they can train in a productive manner, and sticks with it?
Well,
is it an impossible task for us to recruit more people like you, or is there something that we could do that would make it more likely?
I definitely don't think it's impossible. I think, finding some way to see these kids perform in the snatch or the clean, whether it's in training or some type of competition. I don't know. I just thought of something off the top of my head. Doing some type of competition and inviting athletes or football players or all the football players from a D3 conference to have a conference weightlifting meet or something like that. But the biggest thing for me was, Tom told me that, that you would be interested in me if I came to the tryout. So, having a coach express interest to an athlete and, interest in seeing him pursue a sport or come out and train, I think that's a big thing, to know that someone's interested in your potential.
I think that probably rings true to me also, because I think that a lot of these guys that have this, awesome genetic potential in weightlifting probably graduate from college with little enough known about the sport. They never even think about it, and it doesn't really cross their mind, and they're probably a little apprehensive because it's an unknown. They don't know they don't know how well they would stack up against the best that we have. And so they just, if it even crosses their mind, they don't have any compelling reason to pursue it. And a year after college, once they've been lazy for a year and haven't kept training, it's just probably a totally forgotten thing. So you think promoting some type of snatch, clean, and jerk competition for a conference or a series of schools or something, do you think that would be doable? I mean, one of the things that I've known, that I kind of know about high schools, there's an awful lot of coaches that discourage their lifters from competing in, another sport or whatever. Do you think there's enough interest, if such a thing was proposed? Would 20 different collegiate strength coaches say, yeah, there's a meet in our conference, in our general area of the country for collegiate football, baseball, whatever, maybe just collegiate football players. Maybe there's more potential there than with baseball. I don't know. But if there's it's an hour away and it's going to be only against other collegiate football players, and we can go and then we can say we're the strongest team in our conference, would there be interest in that, do you think?
When you put it like that, it sounds kind of tough to get so many strength coaches on board with that idea. Maybe you could approach one coach and say, hey, I don't know, something about having just his team have a mock meet. That might be more feasible.
What if somebody went out and offered prize money or equipment? I mean, what if a company like MDUSA said, the team, the best overall lifter and the team that wins as a team is going to get 5 new bars, for their weight room?
That sounds like a pretty good incentive, especially for the smaller schools. I know the budgets are the big time schools, they have all the money they need for their equipment, but the smaller schools, like where I went, the prospect of winning 5 new bars, I bet our coach would have been pretty excited to try that out.
So you think that's universal in a lot of those small schools, that money is tight enough that some type of prize like that would win them over?
I think so.
I think the most important thing, if you had, say, 3 schools participate, the most important thing would probably be to publicize the hell out of it on Facebook and anywhere else you could, that of XYZ. What conference were you guys in?
The Iowa Conference.
D3 Iowa Conference for football.
Mm-hmm.
Out of all the Division III Iowa schools, what was it? What was the name of the college you went to?
Co-College.
Co-College?
Yeah.
Okay. Co-College is the strongest team. I mean, I think that would probably make, if it was publicized well enough, that might draw other people in that said basically, bullshit, they're not the strongest. We have better athletes,
I think so. I think
there's got to be a competitive streak in any college coach.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So can you think of, is that the best idea you have? I mean, that's a new idea. That's completely new, to me. I've never thought of that before. So I think that's probably an excellent idea. Do you have any other of those great, excellent ideas, or is that the only one you come up with?
That's the only one I have right now.
I give a lot of credence to that because you've been in that situation. I haven't, and I probably don't know as much as I think I do about collegiate athletics because I've never been within that system as an athlete or a coach. So it's interesting. It's a very interesting idea. No, that's got me thinking, actually. Well, that's a hell of an idea. And overall, hopefully, to people that have been listening to this, give it some thought, especially if anyone within USA Weightlifting is listening. There's a lot of guys, and I can name 4 or 5 of them that I've coached that have, medaled at nationals, won nationals, made international teams, that came out of being a college athlete. And they came out of being a college athlete strong, fast, with some experience at least on doing the snatch and clean and jerk. In some cases, reasonably high numbers doing the snatch and clean and jerk. And what's more, they're in shape. They've done 2-a-days in August for football. They can handle a very heavy workload right off the bat. It's not like they got to train 3 years to work up to, training more than 3 days a week. They're ready to right out of the bat because they're used to it, because they did it all for 4 years in college and maybe some in high school. And these guys, there's certainly a lot of guys out there in that situation that could be enticed into weightlifting if they were exposed to it, that might really like it, and could potentially give us a much, much deeper field that is actually competitive for a medal at nationals. My feeling is the deeper, more competitive nationals is, the better our absolute top guys are going to be. And that is, I think, a potential to get, potentially at least, a whole new class of athletes and athletes with high potential and just high, the genetics that make it possible for them to do big numbers in the clean and jerk into the sport. And it's all well and fine. I think that in all, grabbing a talented kid when he's 10 years old will always be the ideal method, the ideal history. But I think in some cases we got to get over thinking we're going to have thousands of those kids that are talented and start weightlifting at 10 years old. I don't see that necessarily happening in the U.S. and in the near term. I think weightlifting would have to be way more popular than it is now to actually get a substantial number of those kids, and I'm talking thousands. But I think that the road to finding guys like Mike Szela and John North coming out of collegiate football programs or baseball or whatever program, who are ready to start in, who are starting at a very high level because of their experiences in collegiate strength training, like Mike and John both did. It's a lot shorter route to get 1,000 of those guys into the sport than it is a 1,000 talented kids who start at 10. And hopefully, we can all think about that, and maybe somebody will have an idea that's even better than Mike Szela's idea. I don't know. But we need to think about that more, and I think that we need to concentrate on that more as people who are interested in talent ID and bringing people into the sport.